All right, continuing our review of Unit 7. We're moving on to page 2 now of Worksheet 1, and it's problems 5 through 8. And again, we're just reminding ourselves that the key to this whole test is SOHCAHTOA. The key to this whole unit, this whole trigonometry thing, is SOHCAHTOA. So they want us to find the missing side here. So again, just like the last problems, the best thing we can start with is by circling our angle and identifying what are my sides. So across on the right angle is the hypotenuse. Well, next to that angle is the adjacent, and then across from it is opposite. All right, so if we're going to find the missing side, we just want to set up a SOHCAHTOA ratio. And the biggest question I've had this unit is, which one do I use? Which one do I use? Well, here we have opposite and we have adjacent. What I mean by that is that they've given us values for those. Right? We have x and we have 10. So we need one of the trig ratios that has opposite and adjacent, O and A. And I'm looking at them, and right here, tangent has both O and A. So I'm going to use the tangent of 35. Remember, this is always our angle. Our angle always goes inside the parentheses, if you will, inside the trig ratio. So tangent of 35 equals the opposite, or x, over adjacent, or 10. Well, the next thing I'm going to do is just solve for x. I need to get x alone. I'm going to do that first by timesing by the denominator. Times by that denominator. You get 10 times tangent of 35 equals x. All right, well, x is alone now. So I can just plug this into my calculator exactly how I see it. I'm going to my calculator and I'm making sure that I'm in degrees. Notice I am in degrees. If I weren't in degrees, I would hit mode and go down and just select degree. But I'm already in degrees. I'm just going to type in 10 times the tangent of 35. And that's my answer, 7.0. They want us to round to the nearest tenth. The tenth place is 1 after the decimal. So the nearest tenth would be 7.0. We don't have units, so we don't have to put units. Again, let's look at number 6. Here's our angle. This is our hypotenuse. Oh, noticing this time we have the hypotenuse. Here's the adjacent, and here's the opposite. So again, the same question would be, how do I know which one to use? And the answer is the same. We're just looking at SOHCAHTOA. Right? We notice that we have A and H. We're going to use cosine. So the cosine of 20, right, remember this is our angle measurement, equals the adjacent, or 19, over the hypotenuse, or x. So again, now we're just going to solve for x. We're going to start by timesing by the denominator. So x times the cosine of 20 equals 19. And be careful here because you might be tempted to try and plug this into the calculator. But notice that x isn't alone yet. X still has this times cosine of 20. So we need to divide by cosine of 20 before we can plug it in. Now that we've done that, x is alone, so we can plug it into the calculator exactly how we see it. 19 divided by cosine of 20, enter. And we get 20.2 when we round to the nearest tenth. 20.2. No units, so we don't need to put them. That's if you're solving for a side. Now, if you're solving for an angle, automatically we're going to think angle inverse. Angle inverse. But we start the same. We know we're going to be using SOHCAHTOA. We circle our angle. find our hypotenuse. Here's the adjacent and the opposite. And I notice I don't have my hypotenuse this time. I have the opposite and adjacent. So I know I'm going to use tangent. But when I go to fill in my angle, I notice that, oh yeah, that's what I'm trying to find. That's my variable. It's missing. That's my x, if you will. So here's x. Tan of x equals opposite 39 over adjacent 45. And if we're solving for an angle, we use the inverse. It just looks like the trig ratio with a -1 power. And it cancels out tangent. Now we take this thing and we plug it exactly into our calculator. We do have to be careful because we have to make sure that the inverse tangent comes first when we plug it in. So we take our calculator and we hit second tangent 39 divided by 45. And we get 40.9. They want us to round to the nearest degree. So our angle is 41. 41 degrees, that is. And now if we look at number 8, we're dealing with much the same thing. We're missing this angle. We've circled it. We're going to find our hypotenuse. Here's our adjacent, and here's our opposite. So we see that we have A and H. Those are the values that they gave us. So we're going to use cosine. Well, the cosine of our missing angle, again, I'm going to name it X this time. The cosine of our missing angle is adjacent 42 over hypotenuse 52. You get our angle inside here. That is the thing we're solving for. That's our variable. So we're going to use the inverse function. And the inverse of cosine just looks like cosine with a -1 on top. They cancel each other out. So we're left with x equals the inverse cosine of 42 over 52. We can plug that into our calculator now. So we're doing second cosine of 42 divided by 52. We're pressing enter. And remember, they want it to the nearest degree. That's the ones place. So we go 36. 36 degrees.